What if I told you the best way to become a good artist is to study how to be a terrible one? In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 15 rules to stay bad at art. And the reason I'm framing it in this way is because there's this concept called inversion thinking, which I found to be incredibly useful for helping me get unstuck and guiding me to achieve the goals I have in both art and life. It's based on a simple truth. Our brains are better at spotting problems than coming up with solutions, because it's how we evolved, wired to detect threats, avoid failure, and survive. So instead of asking, how do I get better at art? You flip it around and ask, how do I guarantee I stay bad at art forever? Then you list out all the ways which, by avoiding, will make you a better artist by accident. And make sure to stick around till the end because I'll give you the reverse, the 15 rules for becoming great at art. By the way, if you're new here, hey, I'm Ori. I'm an artist that's worked with various companies and won an award in the Honkai Star Rail Creator Competition. And on this channel, I make videos exploring how we can level up both our art and ourselves. Also, quick thanks to Printful for kindly sponsoring today's video. If you're interested in turning your art into high quality merch you can sell without having to worry about upfront costs, check out the link below. So the first rule for staying bad at art is simple. Wait for perfection. Wait for the perfect idea or until you have enough time before you can start drawing. Also, never finish anything because it doesn't turn out exactly as you want it to be. And wait until you're good enough before sharing your art. But here's the truth. Things will never be perfect. You'll never get the perfect idea, and an average idea finished is better than a brilliant idea that you never start or complete. You'll also never find more time in your life to draw because life will always find a way to give you more stuff to do or distract you through activities that feed your brain more dopamine, like playing video games. So the artists who improve are the ones who make time to draw and practice, even when it's hard to. You'll also never feel completely ready or that your art is good enough to show to others because you can always improve and become better. That journey doesn't end. But also, perfectionism actually comes from us fearing other people's opinions. Because if it's not perfect, we open our work or ourselves up to criticism, and that's not comfortable. So we spend ages making everything pixel perfect before we put it out, so that we can avoid potential judgment, and we justify this by saying it's quality control. The catch is, the only way to overcome this fear is by actually doing what we're afraid of and putting our work and ourselves out there, even though it's not perfect. And then of course realizing nothing bad actually happened and that we survived. Because the reality is that the only one that pays that much attention to our art is, of course, ourselves. You can think of showing your work to others as a skill that you can practice, and the more you do it, the more you'll naturally become comfortable with it, as you start realizing all the negative judgment and consequences was really just in your head. So don't wait for perfection and just get started, no matter how messy it is or even if you feel that you're not ready. Also, finish things even though it doesn't turn out exactly how you want it to. Because the art journey is not like school. There are no final grades because you can always keep on creating and improving, which means that you can treat everything as practice that makes you even better next time. So don't wait for perfection and instead take imperfect action today. The next rule for staying bad at art is to quit as soon as it gets hard. So you start drawing and you're excited, but you quickly hit a wall with all the fundamentals like perspective and anatomy that you need to learn, or feel that what you're making just isn't that good. And you quickly realize that getting good at art is much harder than you imagined, so you think, I guess I'm just not talented, I guess art isn't for me. This is a great way to stay bad at art because quitting as soon as you hit difficulty guarantees you'll never improve past it. But here's the thing, whenever we start learning a skill or begin a new creative project, we go through the same 5 emotional stages. Stage 1 is uninformed optimism, where everything is shiny, new, and it feels fun. Then we hit stage 2, informed pessimism. This is when reality kicks in and we realize it's harder than we expected. Which then leads us to stage 3, the valley of despair, where we run into a wall, get stuck, or massively fail in some way. But if we push through and persist, we eventually reach stage 4, informed optimism, and we start to see light at the end of the tunnel. We're seeing improvement and we finally figure out how to do the thing, which finally lets us reach stage 5, success and fulfillment, where we succeed at the thing and reap the rewards. The problem is, most people quit as soon as they hit the valley of despair because things get frustrating, hard, or boring and tedious to do. So then they start looking for the next shiny new thing and start a new project or change what they're learning because they have uninformed optimism and it looks easy and fun. Just like this, many people keep going through this cycle of uninformed optimism, informed pessimism, and valley of despair over and over again, never reaching stage 4 and 5 where they actually get good at the thing or finish the project. So to break out of the cycle, you need to keep drawing even when it gets hard or tedious, and do it for so long that it would be unreasonable for you to be bad at it. And I'll quote from the book Mastery here. The boredom will go away once you enter the cycle. The panic disappears after repeated exposure. The frustration is a sign of progress, a signal that your mind is processing complexity and requires more practice. And your insecurities will transform into their opposites when you gain mastery. The next rule for staying bad at art is to watch lots of tutorials and do nothing. So early on in my art journey, I used to just binge watch a whole bunch of tutorials, time lapses, and artist interviews without really applying them in any meaningful way because it felt like I was learning and making progress towards my goal of becoming a professional artist by just watching. But of course, you can't get good by passively absorbing information. You actually have to put your pencil to paper and apply it. I think there's broadly 2 reasons why it's so easy to fall into this trap. The first is watching a video is a lot easier and safer than actually doing the thing, where we will likely run into difficulties and potentially fail. The second is the fallacy of thinking that if we gather enough information, we can avoid every single possible failure and eliminate all uncertainty before we even begin. That's not to say that getting information isn't useful. It is. And if you don't know what to do, then getting information is the best thing you can do. But once you know what to do, getting more information actually just becomes procrastination. This is what's known as the explore-exploit problem. When should we keep exploring and getting more data? And when should we start exploiting and using that data? I think it basically comes down to, if you don't know what to do, go and explore. And as soon as you have enough information to take the next step, you should go exploit it and do the thing. The reason this leads to the fastest improvement is because taking action gets you real-world feedback. The thing you did either worked or it didn't. And based on that feedback, you can then take the next step, which may include getting more information or trying to do the thing again with a different approach. This is a lot more useful than trying to prepare for every single problem you might potentially encounter because it's really inefficient as you're probably not going to encounter them all. Also, the brain is efficient and you'll start to forget what you don't use or need. So if you want to improve, you need to take action. All you really need is the minimum amount of information to know what the next step is and go do it. The next rule for staying bad at art is to take advice from the wrong people. So as a kid growing up, when I told my family that I wanted to become an artist, they looked at me as if I told them that I was going to go to the nearest cliff and jump off to prove that humans could fly. And they all gave me advice like, you can't make a living through art, and you should get a real job and draw in your spare time. And I bought into that. And for a long time, the advice I got from them really held me back and kept me stuck. Because the thing is, no one in my family were artists or even done anything close to what I wanted to do, so their advice wasn't rooted in actual experience or expertise. It was really just their opinion that came from their own insecurities and assumptions about art. Now, I'm sure they said those things out of love and because they thought it was the best for me, but people can have good intentions and give you completely the wrong directions. This is simply because they don't know any better. And that there's also the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people who know very little about something tend to be very confident in their opinions. Just like how you can ask ChatGPT a question that it has no data about, and it will hallucinate and give you completely the wrong answer, but sound perfectly confident that they are right. So you need to carefully choose who you take your advice from, in both real life and of course the internet, and ask yourself, does this person actually know what they are talking about? And do they have the evidence or experience to back it up? This is of course not a call to start distrusting everything and tearing people down, but more a reminder that we should make sure our sources of information are reliable, so we can avoid a situation where the blind is leading the blind. Rule number 5 to stay bad at art is to surround yourself with people you don't want to be like. We often hear that we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with, and that's because as tribal creatures, we humans have an innate tendency to conform to the rest of the tribe. Because getting kicked out and having to fend for ourselves in the wild used to mean death back when we were still hunter-gatherers. Although technology has progressed, our brains are much slower to evolve, so we still unconsciously absorb the behaviors and mindsets of those closest to us. This becomes a problem when the people around you are nothing like you want to be, unsupportive, or worse, try to pull you away from your goals. That was basically the spot I was in when I started my art journey, but I realized that even though I had no one to look up to around me, I could still find them online and in books. Because it's not just about who we hang out with in person. The content we watch, read, listen, and scroll through, those voices are also shaping us. So early on, I decided to do sort of a mental reset by trying to minimize the time I was spending around negative influences, and instead replaced it with immersing myself in the content of the people who had the mindset and skills I wanted to develop. I'm of course not saying that we should completely stop socializing with everyone in our lives that we don't see as a role model, especially if it's people we care about like family or close friends. But we should still be aware of the different influences we have in our lives and try to deliberately spend more of our time with the people and voices that help us move towards the goals we have. By the way, if you're interested in learning more from me, I'm currently making a course on the fastest way to learn anime art, and I'll leave a link to the waiting list below if you want to be the first to know when it's ready. The next rule for staying bad at art is to wait to feel like drawing before you draw. So wait for motivation, wait for energy, wait until you're in the mood to draw before you draw. The reason this is such a great way to stay bad at art is because our brains are wired to keep us safe, not to achieve our goals. So the moment drawing gets hard, we'll stop feeling like doing it. And this emotion can feel like anxiety, despair, but also boredom or tediousness. However, getting good at anything requires time and effort, which means consistency is king. So one of the most important skills we need to practice and improve at, if we want to get good, is our ability to do the thing even when we don't feel like it. I found that one of the best ways to practice this and overcome procrastination is to do what I call the rule of 10. The first step is to start a stopwatch, not a timer, for 10 minutes. Then you start drawing, and the only rule is that you're not allowed to do anything else until 10 minutes pass. After 10, you can stop if you want to, but most of the time you'll find that 10 minutes is really all it takes to get in the flow of doing the thing, and you'll want to keep going. Because motivation usually doesn't come from waiting until you feel like it, but from just starting anyway and letting momentum take care of the rest. The next rule for staying bad at art is to spend all of your time chasing shortcuts. When I was a beginner, I made the mistake of obsessing and spending way too much time trying to find the perfect brush. And I fell into this trap because, like any shortcut, it's easy to change brushes and you think you're going to get instant results from it. It was only after trying hundreds of brushes and still not finding the perfect one that I realized that the time I was spending on it didn't really get me anywhere. So I forced myself to just pick one and stick with it, and focused instead on putting that time into actually drawing and practicing the things that matter. And that's when I finally started to improve. The thing is, shortcuts are actually the long road in disguise because they either don't work, the results they give don't last, or they just don't lead to meaningful growth. The reality is, you can't master anything by just stacking one shortcut on top of the other. And if something's easy to do, then it naturally also means that a lot of people can do it, so the outcome isn't that valuable either. So if you want lasting improvement in art, there's no way around it. You have to put in the time and effort. You have to learn the fundamentals and build a strong foundation. Practice deliberately and show up consistently. The long road definitely feels slower, but it's usually the only road that will get you to where you want to go. The next rule for staying bad at art is to never take ownership of your journey. So early on, I used to despair a lot about how I started art late and that I was behind, and if only I started 10 years ago, things would be so much better and all that. But the blaming and complaining didn't solve anything or move me forward. In fact, it just kept me stuck because I realized that whoever or whatever you blame, you give the responsibility and thus your power to change to. The thing is, it might be true that what's holding you back isn't your fault. But you can still take ownership of the situation and decide that you're going to do something about it anyway. Because although we can't always control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond, and that's where our power to change lies. So the people who grow are the ones who take ownership of their journey, focus on what they can control, and take action that moves them forward, no matter the circumstance they find themselves in. Rule number 9 for staying bad at art is to let other people define what progress looks like for you. So some time ago, I was confused as to why I was constantly feeling unhappy, even though I've made huge progress and achieved many of the goals that I had set for myself when I started my art journey. It was then I came across the concept of mimetic desire that I finally understood why. Basically, we humans are naturally wired to want what other people want, not necessarily what we actually care about. So the highlight reel of our family, friends, and even people we don't know on social media starts to become our benchmark for what progress and success is meant to look like for us too. This pulls us in 1,000 different directions and makes us feel lost and constantly feeling inadequate with where we are and what we have right now. The worst part is, a lot of the benchmarks we compare ourselves to is largely out of our control. So what really helped me overcome this was two things. The first was that I realized that we're all basically playing a different game in life. We're all different people, and only we have our unique set of life experiences, DNA, advantages, disadvantages, and personal goals. So it makes no sense to compare where we are with other people because the game we're playing is completely different. The second was that I started to simply define success as doing the things that I said I was going to do today. In art, that meant setting a certain number of hours to draw every day. And if I put those hours in, then I was a success. Because although we can't always control the outcome, we can control our inputs, which are our actions and how much effort we put in. And by defining what progress and success looks like by our own standards and putting it under our control, we can avoid the constant comparison trap. This helps us stay more motivated and consistent in our journey, which is what will actually lead us to make more progress and reach our goals over time. Next rule, focus only on the outcome. This is great if you want to stay bad at art and miserable, because most meaningful goals in life take a long time to achieve. For example, if your goal is to draw at a professional or expert level, that can easily take 3 to 5 years of consistent effort. So if you don't enjoy the journey, you'll quickly burn out and give up long before you get there. And even if you do hit your goal, you'll quickly realize there's this thing called the arrival fallacy, which is the mistaken belief that achieving a specific goal or milestone will bring you lasting happiness or fulfillment. It's thinking that once I get there, then I'll finally be happy. In reality, when you do reach that milestone, the boost in happiness is only temporary because your brain will quickly get used to that new baseline in a process called hedonic adaptation. And you'll move the goalpost again and want the next thing because then you'll be happy. So the only way to overcome this trap is to fall in love not with the goal, but with doing the work to reach it, whether that's drawing or practicing the fundamentals. Because lasting fulfillment tends to not come from reaching arbitrary goals, but from building a life where we find our day-to-day actions meaningful or enjoyable, preferably both, which makes the process itself feel rewarding. And if we enjoy the process, we'll get further than other people who don't, because it will feel like play to us, but work to others. By the way, I hope you're finding this video helpful so far, and if you are, do consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss out on any new ones. The next rule for staying bad at art is to assume that you already know everything. Bonus points if you also ignore all the feedback and advice you get, especially when it comes from people who are further along in the journey. The thing is, growth begins the moment we realize we still have something to learn. The most successful artists and creators I've met aren't the ones who insist they're always right and they already know everything, but they're the ones constantly learning, asking better questions, and seeking feedback, because to them, finding out they're wrong isn't a blow to their ego, but a chance to update their understanding and be better. Ralph Waldo Emerson put it perfectly. Every man I meet is my master in some point, and in that, I learn of him. However, as an artist, it can be paralyzing to be in a mindset where we think we know so little that we need to always be better before we can create anything. So what I recommend is wearing two hats. When you're creating your art, wear the hat of the confident creator and don't second guess yourself. But when you're looking to improve, wear the hat of the humble learner and have an open mind. Next rule, make a mistake and then repeat it. This is amazing for staying bad at art. Let's say you struggle with drawing the body properly and you never study anatomy or look up references and you just keep winging it and drawing it wrong over and over again. This is how you get people who draw for years and still be at a beginner level, because they didn't draw for 10,000 hours. They basically did the same 1 hour 10,000 times and kept doing the same mistakes. There's this quote often attributed to Albert Einstein that goes, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." So you need to not only draw, but also reflect on what mistakes you're making, and then learn how to not repeat it again next time. And if you do, your art will inevitably start to improve. Next, avoid discomfort. This is another surefire way to stay bad at art. Because the thing a lot of people miss is that it's the hard things, the things outside our comfort zone and that we might fail at, that leads to the most growth. Just like how in a game we know we're heading in the right direction when we encounter enemies, the things we find hard in art tells us exactly the things we need to practice and improve at to get to the next level. So it's counterintuitive, but it's only by leaning into discomfort and what's hard that we'll get good and reach our full potential. Related to this is the next rule for staying bad at art, which is to ignore your bottlenecks. Let's unpack this. The bottleneck is the weakest part of a system. It's the one thing that limits everything else. In art, it's the skill that's holding us back the most, and it's typically the thing we want to avoid practicing because, by definition, we find it really hard or confusing. So maybe you can sketch and draw okay, but when it comes to coloring and shading, you always struggle and that becomes your bottleneck. But if you never leave your comfort zone and tackle it, it will forever hold you back. Speaking of which, the next rule for staying bad at art is to ignore all the non-art stuff. What I mean by this is that there's a lot of things in the art journey that isn't just drawing. And related to the previous rule, those things might just be your bottleneck. For example, learning how to learn, a topic that many of the videos I've made on this channel cover, can greatly increase the rate at which you improve at. And if you're interested in one day turning art into a side or your main hustle, learning how to build an audience, creating a good portfolio, and monetizing your art also becomes key skills to learn. In fact, this isn't obvious when you're starting out, but one of the biggest accelerators to improving is to start making money from your art. Because once you do, you're getting paid to do the thing, which means you can spend more time to both do and get better at it. In other words, you're getting paid to learn and level up. Now, you might think this is limited to doing commissions, but that's not the case at all. And basically every freelance artist I know don't try to rely on it as their only way to monetize. For example, these days you can easily create and sell your own merchandise through a company like Printful, who's kindly sponsoring today's video. They let you do print on demand, so the product is only created after someone buys it, which means you don't have to worry about storage, shipping, or upfront costs, which takes away a lot of the risk and stress that tends to come with selling physical goods. You can also design directly on their website and preview everything to make sure it's exactly the way you want it. Here's how it works. First, you select the product that you want to create. Printful allows you to create all sorts of merch like posters, prints, shirts, hoodies, mugs, bags, phone cases, and much more. Then you can upload your art or design and customize the product until you're satisfied with what it looks like. From there, you can connect Printify to your online shop, and if you don't have one, you can create one for free on places like StoreEnvy. And if you already have one, they integrate with all the major platforms like Etsy, Shopify, TikTok Shop, and more. Then after you finalize the details, the product will be added to your store, and just like that, you now have your own merch live and ready for sale. Afterwards, you can just sit back and let Printful handle the rest. When someone makes a purchase, they'll create it, pack it, and ship it all automatically, so you can focus on drawing and creating your art. Printful is also known for their high product quality and competitive pricing, and some of the largest brands in the world like Coca-Cola, Spotify, and MTV use them, which means as an independent artist, you can get the exact same quality and service with zero upfront costs. They've also got fulfillment centers all over the world, which means you can print locally and avoid extra fees. And if you're the type of creator that wants to add a personal touch to your merch and make your brand stand out, they let you do things like add insert cards, personalized messages, custom tracking links, and more. So if that sounds interesting, you can check Printful out through the link in the description, and back to the video. So I've just given you the 15 rules to stay bad at art. And when you reverse them and make them the rules for your art journey, you start becoming good by accident because you avoid making the silly mistakes that most people make that keeps them stuck. So here are the rules in reverse. Take imperfect action. Continue drawing even when it gets hard and keep at it for so long it would be unreasonable for you to be bad at it. Watch tutorials and actually apply it. Take advice from the right people. Surround yourself with the people you want to be like. Draw even when you don't feel like it. Don't chase shortcuts. Take ownership of your journey. Define what progress and success looks like for you. Focus more on the journey than the destination. Be willing to learn. Don't repeat the same mistakes. Lean into discomfort. Tackle your bottlenecks. And learn the non-art stuff too. And those are the 15 rules for staying bad at art flipped around. And you'll also want to make sure you aren't making the 3 worst beginner mistakes that I see artists make all the time, which I go through in this video. This was Ori, thanks for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!